Did you feel that? That sudden discomfort? How the room became so heavy with silence for a few seconds. Your brain trying to understand what is happening. You're probably thinking of different situations and scenarios, like maybe she forgot her speech. That is illusion, ladies and gentlemen. Your mind trying to impose meaning on sensory experiences. And this is just the beginning. And on that note, no, I did not forget my speech. Maya, or what I would call the veil of illusion, simply because it sounds mystical that way. Maya is so deeply interwoven in each of our lives that in the subtle, tranquil moments, we experience its presence as though it is almost tangible. Now, when I say the word illusion, what comes to your mind? Probably these images, right? When I was a child, I used to love drawing them and shading them with my pencil. But let me tell you here today that illusion is something much more beyond than these images. If we go by the dictionary definition of it, it is an instance of misrepresentation or misinterpretation of a sensory experience. In short, MMSE, misinterpretation, misrepresentation of a sensory experience. And Maya is one of the most beautiful concepts which we will dive in depth with. When we think of Maya, we often think that it's something vague or it's deception. How many of you here remember the feeling of getting a new phone? I do. It is quite a feeling. But do you remember how long does that excitement, that happiness last? A few months. Up to top, 3 months. But then it slowly fades away. It slips down. And you start using that cherished phone more like a paperweight. Now, why does that happen? The answer is illusion, ladies and gentlemen, Maya. People call it deception, but I call it the threshold of perception. Maya allows us to feel, comprehend, contemplate, and understand the complex world around us at the pace of our perception. And hey, this is not just me saying that. In 8th century, a renowned Indian philosopher, Adi Shankaracharya, described Maya as the mysterious power of Brahmana, or the ultimate power of the cosmos. He believed that Maya had the power to make eternal appear temporary, infinite appear finite. And above all, it held the grand design through which consciousness experiences itself. Quite heavy, isn't it? But what if I tell you right now that all of you sitting here in the audience, all the reality you see around you, everyone you know, everything you see is all fabricated, edited, molded by none other than your own eyes and your own mind? Sounds bizarre, but that's what Immanuel Kant said. A German philosopher, a very wise man, he described that one can never see the thing in itself. They can only see it by their appearance. If I break it down for you, one can never experience reality as it is. You can only perceive it through your senses. Let's try and make this a bit more practical and connected with our lives. How many of you here, show a show of hands, how many of you here have heard about the story, The Desert and the Mirage? A very popular one, right? If you haven't, let me remind you. The Desert and the Mirage. There was this traveler who was desperate, hopeless, thirsty, lost in the vast desert. He was on his knees accepting the fate of death. But in a distance, he sees a shining blue lake, and a ray of hope falls on him. With all his might, he gets up and he runs towards it. As he approaches closer, however, he realizes that the lake is merely a mirage or an illusion. Quite disheartening. But if we look at it just as a story and we try to derive something from this very story, I would say that the lake, the shining blue lake which we were talking about, of course, it is an illusion. It is Maya. But his desire, his desperation, were they illusions? No. They were raw. They were real. They weren't illusions. Similarly, in our lives, we all chase for certain things. Success, popularity, acknowledgement, validation, approval. We think that these desires, these feelings will make us whole. But do they, ladies and gentlemen? Do they make us whole? No. No, they don't. As we grow old, over time, when we look back at life, we realize that maybe it didn't matter. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. These feelings seem to just slip away, just like the mirage. Now, if I drive you through another viewpoint of the very same story, imagine the traveler who was ready to accept the fate of death on his knees. Imagine what would happen if he did not see that lake. He probably would have died, or he wouldn't have gotten up. But that very illusion, that very mirage, gave him the strength to get up and walk. Though it may be materialistic, though it may be temporary, it still gave him the courage, it still showed him some hope that he could stand up and keep moving. So now, audience, the story's interpretation, I leave it to you. It is your wish how you perceive and what you take from this traveler right here. Swami Vivekananda once said that what the mind believes, it makes real. A very popular saying it is. When we look at certain psychological studies of people and of human minds and how illusion influences it, we'll find many such interesting cases. How many of you here have heard about the placebo effect? Placebo effect, let me explain you, is a very renowned study. It says that the belief in treatment brings an actual physical change. Now, what treatment are we talking about here? Every treatment. Let's understand this through a story. Back in 9th grade, we had this chapter called The Aakhri Patta, or The Last Leaf. A very touching story, it really stayed with me. In that, there was this one girl who was suffering from severe pneumonia. She was lying on the bed, waiting for her death to come. Every day, she laid on her bed, looked out the window, and saw that one creeper, which had one leaf hanging on for its dear life. She wrapped herself in an illusion that when that leaf falls, I shall die. Her friend got to know that. And he went an extra mile and drew an almost realistic leaf for her to look at. Every morning, the girl woke up, looked out the window, saw the leaf, and slept again, thinking that the next day it will fall and she will die. These days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. And slowly her illusion broke, her perception changed. She decided how foolish it was of her to let one single leaf decide the fate of her life and death. She was wrapped in the illusion and she broke free. She started believing in the treatment, she believed that she would get better, and she did. A very happy ending to it. She did get better. Another popular study which we can look at is the halo effect. All of you here in the audience, when you look at each other, when you look at the people around you, when you look at me or the stage or everything around you, you perceive, you derive something from everything. You might think that they are competent, they must be confident. They are intelligent, they must be pretty. They are confident, they are bold, they must be very intellectual. This is what your brain does on a default mode. It perceives, it comprehends, and it contemplates. Especially since we are living in such a digitally packed world where apps like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, they're at the tips of our fingers. We look at people living glamorous life, making bold statements, and we instantly idolize them. We put them on a pedestal and we say, this person is the greatest of all time, the GOAT. But do we ever pause for a second and think, what if the person I'm idolizing, I worship so much, what if that person is doing something morally or ethically wrong? Do we do that? No, we don't. Why? Because that one good impression, that one image, that one portrayal of that lavish lifestyle the person has shown us, it influences us so much, it sinks in us so much, that we start overlooking their flaws, their wrongdoings, or their setbacks. A very similar study to halo effect is the confirmation bias effect. Now, when we talk about this, how many of you here are not so good at maths? Maybe a few of you are, and maybe a few of you aren't. So let's understand this through a simple case study. Let's understand confirmation bias effect through person X, a quite charming, dashing young man whose maths isn't his strongest suit. Every time he sits down, opens his books to do maths, and every time he does a problem and he gets it wrong, his brain pushes or pops out a voice note. You aren't good at this. You should just leave maths. It's not your cup of tea anyways. You have other subjects to focus on. Just drop it. Just close the books. And person X does that. He says, yeah, maybe. And then he closes the books and puts them away. The day of results arrive, and what happens? Surprise, surprise, he got a very bad result, and it was disappointing. Now, I want you to imagine the flip side of the story. What if the person X did not listen to that voice note? What if he said that maybe I got this one question wrong, but I will get the next one right? What will happen? He would have gotten much better marks, much better results. He would have been satisfied. That is confirmation bias effect. When we see what we already believe in, he believed he was bad at maths, the output he saw was bad. Now, if I connect the dots here of all the case studies and psychological studies I've presented to you, you'll find one thing in common. It all comes down to your perception, audience. No one here is telling you what to think, what to do, what to perceive, what to understand. It's all you. Maya is not a lie. It's not a vague imagination. It's filtered truth. Ultimately, Maya is everywhere. You might as well call it omnipresent. It's such a beautiful thing that it shapes you as a being and the world as a whole. Without Maya, our lives can't work. Maya is something which is so deeply interwoven in us that it makes us realize that there are much more things to look at, there are much more things to understand. And Maya, it never stops chasing you. Just as you break free from one illusion, there's another one standing at your door waiting for you to answer. With its baggages, of course. And you ultimately do. You answer the door every single time. So you might as well ask, when does this stop? When do you not answer the door? When do you actually break free from illusion? That is when we are on our deathbeds. That is when we realize that the illusion of life has been broken because our life is over itself. Maya reminds us that perception is never pure. Yet the very distortion of this perception gives life its beauty, its color, and its motion. So perhaps we aren't meant to escape Maya. We're just meant to be aware of it. Because in those dainty spaces of awareness, of knowing and what to believe, we find the truth. The truth not beyond illusion, but within it. That's why when we look at a painting, we often get so blinded by the bright paints it has that we forget the canvas that holds it all together. That is Maya for me, ladies and gentlemen. A canvas which holds our whole life together, a thread that ties us with ourselves, with the people around us, with our surroundings, and with the universe. A beautiful concept, a concept beyond each of our imagination, each of our perception. To conclude, as Kabir ji once rightly said, Maya taji na jaye, Maya bujhi na jaye, Maya ke ant na paye. Maya cannot be abandoned, neither can it be fully understood, and it certainly will never end. Thank you.